Broadcasting live from the Vegas Video Network studios, just steps from the Las Vegas Strip, it's Talktails! And now our host, she's our very own kaleidoscope of talent. What? It's Kelly Clinton!
Listen to the crowd. We have more people in the studio today, and you'll find out why. Welcome to Talktails on the Vegas Video Network. I am your host, Kelly Clinton-Holmes. It's so great to be back, and I can feel the energy in the room. Seriously, there are more people here in the studio audience today than I think ever before, because we have a legendary jazz comedian, iconic in the business. This gentleman, I've been watching him for years on every major talk show there is, and I just worked with him at the Suncoast in a way. You could say that if someone else does the show. You could say we work together. We have legendary comic Pete Barbutti No, don't come up yet. It's too soon. He's coming to the stage, but it's not time yet. He's so ready at all times to perform that, yes, not yet. Not yet, Pete. I love that. He's definitely a showbiz guy. All right, but before we meet Pete Barbutti or Beauty, we're going to get to the bottom of that story when he gets up here, how to pronounce his name correctly. I want you to meet someone else right now, our Talktails Orchestra, Mr. Kenny Davidson.
Oh.
Play for the people. Yeah. This is going to be exciting for you because he too is a musician, Pete Barbutti, and you guys are going to connect in a way that only musicians can relate to each other.
I know.
Hi, Kenny.
I can't wait.
You have a show, you're at Don't Tell Mamas, is that
I am.
correct?
3 nights a week.
3 nights a week. What nights?
Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday.
And you're singing and playing
Singing
for the
and
people?
playing for 7 hours straight.
7 hours?
Yeah.
And does anyone else sing?
We have singing bartenders, and then audience members come in and sing too. So we
Okay.
have singers all night long.
But sometimes, is it just
Sometimes,
Kenny
like last night, it was pretty much just me. Because nobody wants to brave the cold.
We got to get more people. I know you have crowded nights too, but
Saturday we were slammed.
Saturday
so.
you were slammed.
Yeah.
There's something else going on at Don't Tell Mamas. On the 27th of January, a friend of mine, Jay Joseph, is going to be there with a show called Music Can Be Murder. It's a murder mystery show, and it's an audience kind of participation show. You get involved, interactive with the audience, and he's got a group called Dangerous Curves and some really talented people. You can get tickets at touchofmystery.com. So I may be there. I may see you, Kenny.
You might.
I may murder you. You never know. Anyway.
I gotta get going.
Are we filming right now? Did I say that on camera? That's not good. And I also want to say hello to our producer and the creator of the Vegas Video Network, Mr. Scott Whitney. Hi, Scott.
Konnichiwa.
Yes. Kazoon, hi.
Oh, I don't know what you said. All I know is konnichiwa.
How are you, sir?
I am very good today, although it's a little colder than I like.
It is colder. I did not dress properly when I was outside. Very cold. Did you expect it to be warmer today?
No, I didn't expect it, but I'm not happy with it. Do you like this cold crap?
No, I was born in New Jersey, and at that time I could take all the cold. I walked to school in the snow, uphill.
And both ways.
Eh.
Right.
But now I grew up in Las Vegas from 12 years old on. I'm a wimp with the cold.
Yeah, I know. It sucks.
Where are you from originally?
Southern California.
Aha!
That's right.
Now I get it.
My favorite word used to be bitchin'.
Bitch, were you a surfer?
Well, kinda.
Kind
really
of. What do you-
beautiful, long blonde hair. I was a very pretty boy.
So you were a
back then.
poser.
Oh,
were
hey.
not-
Hey now.
Well, you got it. Okay.
The best part of this is all the respect I get.
Oh, I totally
good. That's
respect
good.
you, and you know that. You just brought up hair. You brought up beautiful long hair. I have to continue and tell you about my audition
Oh,
from last week. Remember I told you I auditioned for a commercial for the Water District,
Right,
and I
right.
did a little sample of my acting. Well, I forgot to tell you that the part was for a redhead,
Oh.
a redheaded mom. So I decided yesterday, because I got a call back. Aren't you happy for me?
You know why you got the call back?
I got a call
because of your appearance here and the reenactment, probably you did last week.
I'm sure that's what it was. So what I tried to do this morning was I wanted to get my hair a little redder just to really secure the part. And I colored it myself. Oh. And it was brown a few hours ago. Yes.
Really?
So I ran to the CVS and I got some other hair, because my hairdresser was not available. I got some other hair color, and it looked like this. And see, that was the color I was going for.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. So then it turned even darker, and so I went back to the store and I purchased this.
Okay.
So I almost didn't make it to the audition because my hair is so much darker than it was when I went. But I did make it to the audition. And just as I did well, and I left, and they called me in the parking lot. Hey, Kelly, do you have a few more minutes? We want to see you again. Oh, so I went back in and I did it again. So wish me luck and tell me never to do this on my own again.
Well, first of all,
not a good idea.
Am I allowed to wish you luck? Isn't that kind of against the rules?
Well, you could say break a leg, right, Pete? Break a leg.
Let me just say this about that. I think you just, kind of did a little bit of man behind the curtain. I figured you were a natural redhead.
No, I am, but I got older and things changed and my hair changed, so I had to start helping it get back to its natural self. Okay. But you know what? Our guest today is also a hair person. He's got style. He's got a certain look that he is very famous for as well. And I can't wait to find out when he started doing his hair that way and why he continues to do it that way. But I love it, and I want to hear the scoop because I know there's something behind all that. So we're going to meet our guest, Pete Barbutti, right after this commercial break. We'll be back with Talktails after this.
3, 2, 1. Oh, I need to come up with something funny to say. 3, 2, 1. Wow. But the co-host, really, I have to say, watching. Well,
That's how you do it. You dare
really?
watch. There you go.
I got it.
We are the Odds Couple.
Hi, my name is Scott Pritchard.
And I am Anthony Padilla.
You're watching the Vegas Video Network.
You are.
You are. We are too.
Welcome back to Talktails. Oh my goodness, you have magical powers, Pete. We're going to meet our guest, legendary jazz comedian, Mr. Pete Barbutti. Yeah, oh, yeah. Hi, Pete.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
You good? Now, first of all, I feel like I'm not saying your name right.
No, that's interesting because when the origin of the name is Italian. My grandparents came over from a little village outside of Naples called Santomena. And in Italian, the U was pronounced like U, so the correct pronunciation is Barbutti. Okay. But when they came over and settled in New York first and then in eastern Pennsylvania, then it became Americanized, so the U was pronounced long. So when I grew up, it was always Barbutti. But since then, it's been pronounced in many ways. Somebody made me a demo tape once of Tonight Show appearances, and there were, I think, 15 with Johnny Carson and 15 with guest hosts. It was Bob Newhart, McLean Stevenson, Don Rickles, George Carlin. I can't even name all but there were like 15 different hosts and 15 with Carson. And what they did is they edited out to just the very shortest part. And the funny part is it's Carson saying, "Here's Pete Barbutti," and the next guy say, "Pete Barbutti, Pete Barbutti, Pete Barbutti." It was a Baruti. When they're put real next to each other, the contrast becomes exaggerated. So
do you have a preference?
No, it doesn't.
You don't care.
No, I don't care.
You don't care. Isn't that funny? I mean, well, anyway, I'm going to say, I used to say Barbutti.
Yeah, that's the correct American.
Something I read that kind of said Barbutti, so I kind of went with that the first few times.
Yeah, it's I also explained to the guys that my name legally the last name is spelled with one T, but I started doing the Steve Allen show back in the early '60s, and the videograph guy put it with two T's, And on the stage monitor, that in the old days, this was done in kinescope. They didn't have tape yet.
Right.
And you didn't see the videograph across the bottom.
Right.
So you could just see yourself, So I did about 6 or 7 shows, and I never saw the show because I was always working at night when the show played. And then finally, I saw the show, and I saw it with 2 T's, and I called the agency that was representing me and my manager at the time, and he said, we can't change it now because people will think it's a different person, and so you have to leave it with 2 T's.
So you changed your name.
It doesn't matter.
All right, now you mentioned the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And Steve. Now, you the other day when we worked together, you mentioned that you were the guest that was on more than...
Burt Reynolds and I, we did it the last week. A lot of the regulars did. And Carson told me, he says, you and Burt tied for the most guest appearances. Now, Burt Reynolds also hosted it a bunch of times. Incidentally, a little aside, Burt Reynolds, I did it with him a couple times. One of the best hosts of a talk show you could imagine.
Really?
Great sense of timing, knew when to butt in,
right.
Knew when to stay out of your way. I mean, you can't teach that. He was just uncanny. And he told me the story. Right after he did a couple of stupid movies, he did one where he was an Indian, a karate movie, his first big movie. And he had done a couple other of those movies. And he got a call from the director and the producer to do, what was that movie made him a star? One word, Down South.
The one where they go, you got a pretty mouth.
Yeah, right,
Ooh,
yeah.
Deliverance.
That's the one that made him a star. He got a call from the producer, and he went in to meet the guy, and he said to the guy, did you see my movie, this? And the guy said, no, I've never seen that. He said, did you see this? I've never seen that. He said, what have you seen? The guy said, I saw you on The Tonight Show.
Aha.
And there was something that came across there. So he got the part in Deliverance because of The Tonight Show. And he always thanks Johnny Carson. He was good because I knew how I could break Burt Reynolds up by going a certain direction.
Right.
And it was always fun to see that happen just when you're ready to end something.
Right.
And you'd say something to him and he'd fall apart. It was always...
Now, your appearances on The Tonight Show are extremely famous.
Well, most of them were. It's hard to... Because the people who did it a lot were more actors, and they would just come on and sit on the panel, and they'd have a story prepared.
Right.
Because when you say... So,
see, we don't like to do that here. We don't like to prepare.
I know. My relationship with Carson and with the actual producer, who was Peter LaSalle, was very special. When I went in, I went to see my associate producer, and they said, what are you going to do? And I'd say, I'm going to do a story about rabbits. And they'd say, you never tell a story about rabbits. You've been telling us that. They'd say, okay, how much time are you doing? I'd say 7 minutes. They'd say, you never do 7 minutes. And they would let me go.
Yes, that's what I was asking.
And the same
about.
thing on the
They
panel,
time you,
Carson would say, what do you want to talk about?
Right.
And I'd say, let's just talk about something. I just came from a stupid little gig and something. He said, okay, we'll start off with that. And he would trust me, and I would trust him enough to go into a direction where I knew he would stop me and say, wait a minute, are you telling me that you did this or that? So it was
a perfect straight man.
It was a great match. And that made doing the show even. But doing it so frequently, it was very difficult because I had to do an actual piece of material.
Right.
So if you did 7 minutes a show, like 50 shows, that's
a lot.
That's hours and hours of material.
But I read something. I read an interview that you did with someone, and that you said that's why they asked you back a lot, because you had so much material.
Well, and I also never did the standard stand-up about my mother-in-law, or I was on a vacation and this happened to my car. I'd always do something kind of off the wall.
Right.
Now I had a couple of appearances. I've never talked about this. I had a couple of appearances in a row where I did one, and it was right after the terrible fire at the Hilton here.
Yes,
where
I
we
remember
lost
that,
some
yes.
lives. And the guys in the band said, hey, they know I live here. At a rehearsal, they said, what's going on with the Hilton? That fire was terrible. And I was telling them, I said, yeah, I know, but, while I'm telling them the story, this horrible roar comes into the studio, and the back scrim was on fire.
What?
Right behind the band.
Wow.
And so everybody in the band said, what do we do? You know, I mean, the whole band is set up there. So I said, look, grab your horns and let's make a real calm. So we went out to the front of NBC, and the crowd was lined up waiting to get in. You know, they lined up for hours. But all of the double doors with the panic bars were chained with locks. So we couldn't get out.
Oh,
and
boy.
we stood there saying, okay, let's just make a call, and we'll see what bop, bop, bop. Well, real, let's not panic. And the smoke was starting to, because these scrims are like 60 feet high, you know. And they're what they call fire retardant, which is one of those words like, you know, like I guess like a little slightly pregnant, you know. Fire retardant, but they were still burning, and the smell, the smoke was filling the studio. It was very spooky. So anyway, we got out of there, and we finally, the fire department came and they broke some of the chains, and we got out, and so they had to cancel the show because there were like 4 inches of water on the floor.
Wow.
So the next show I go in to do, Johnny wasn't there. Richard Dawson, who's gone now, Dickie Dawson. Well, we know him as Dickie as a comic. Before he hosted, he did Hogan's Heroes, and then the
Family Feud.
Family Feud,
yes.
He's a very nice man too, and he happened to be a fan of mine, so it was easy. It was duck soup going in. So anyway, I went in, and the opening act was Della Reese, who was a dear friend from years ago, and a very close friend, and I just love Della with all my heart. She's a great singer. Her roots were gospel, then she came up jazz. She went into the pop thing and sold millions of records. And so she did her first song, and she sat on the panel. And I remember it was baseball playoffs. We had a little monitor in the back we were watching and listening to the show, too. And Richard said, would you do another song? And she said, yeah, I'd like to do a song written by Michel Legrand called Little Boy Lost. It's a great song, Little Boy Lost. Search of little girl lost, da 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 da. And she started off with just brushes and the bass player. And then the band comes in, you know. And she's singing, and we're listening to Della, but sort of watching the ball. And all of a sudden, she starts to sing out of tune, which Della Reese never did.
Wow.
And then she started to drop beats, which is impossible. And everybody turned to the monitor. And then she collapses on the floor. Now, there's no curtain at the Tonight Show. You can't draw a curtain. She's out in front of a very large audience, 500 people.
Yeah.
And the cameraman, of course, followed her down to the floor, which is what you do. You follow the action. And there she lay on the floor, and she was regurgitating and convulsing. And the nurse had just gone home. And the nurse leaves at 5. This was like 5:15. And so fortunately, right across the street is St. Joe's Hospital, Children's Hospital. So they made a call, and the medics came over, and they worked on her in front of the audience for like almost an hour, I guess about 50 minutes, to try and get her stabilized. Then they got her on a gurney and wheeled her out. And the producer came to me and said, guess who goes on now?
And
I
you
said,
saved
what?
the show.
I said, what? So I went out and I did something really off the wall, and the audience laughed hilarious. So they weren't laughing at what they were laughing at the release of tension.
Oh, yeah.
And then
It's
I
like
went to the
healing.
panel.
Yeah.
And Richard Dawson talked to me, and then he said, you notice Della's not here. She wasn't feeling well. After the show, they had a meeting, and they said, you know what? She may be terminally ill. She had an aneurysm.
Oh, is that what
And
happened
yeah,
right there?
right on stage,
My
doing the middle of
God.
the song. And she may die, and so we can't just say she wasn't feeling well and she
Right.
left, because it looked like we let her go and she was ill. So they had to scrub the show. So anyway,
Wow.
the next show Della did, she was off for like 3 years because they got her stabilized, and the surgeon went in and talked to her and said, you have two options. He said, we can treat it with blood thinners, but it will occur again.
Really?
Somewhere down the road.
Really?
Or we can do the surgery. But he said there's only a 50-50 chance of coming out of the surgery.
Right.
So you have to make. So she didn't waste 1 minute. She said, do the surgery, man, because I don't want to live on the edge for the rest of my life. So she had a stabilizer took about 3 weeks to build her up. And she had the surgery, and it was a long recovery after the surgery. She had to learn almost to do everything
learn to
again.
speak
And
and
so
all
the
the
next
motor
show she
skills.
did was, I had a series in Canada, up in Toronto, called Pete's Place. It was taped in Toronto. It was about a club off the strip in Vegas, but we taped it up there. So producer was calling her, and he said, how about Della Reese? I said, well, you know, she was ill. I don't know if she's going to work again. And he said, well, I'll call her. And Della said, yes, I'll fly up and I'll do the show. So she came up. Her hair was still, head was almost shaved yet. Her hair was just began to grow in because it was a massive
How long
surgery.
after the surgery?
Probably 6 months after the surgery. So she was still coming back.
Yeah.
So I was so anxious to see her, and we had a suite in a hotel where all the guests met the day before the shooting. So I forget who else was on the show, but
He means shooting of the show.
yeah,
He
right,
doesn't
yeah.
mean there was also a shooting.
Yeah, please, yeah. So she showed up, and she walked in the room. I got up, and she went like this, and she said, "Wait a minute," she said, "I got to ask one question." She said, "How did you follow that?" You know? I said, "Boy, nobody could, man." So anyway, she was fine, and we shot for 2 days, and she was great.
You have some stories now.
Well,
you've worked with everybody.
I think I have. I know that I worked with everybody that when I was growing up, everybody ever wanted to meet, you know,
Really?
the people. I mean, Frank Sinatra, of course, Nat King Cole. I was with Nat for a couple of years on the road. We became really connected.
You were really close. I read about that.
Yeah,
as well.
we were really
making music together.
Yeah, and his Nat's idea of a good time was after the show because we did one show a night, and Nat had a problem with Internal Revenue. They came to his house in Los Angeles. He lived on a golf course, and he was the first African-American guy to buy a home on that golf course. But he was Nat King Cole. He was so famous it was unbelievable internationally. And so the guy they sent to audit him, to do a field audit, was just transferred there from Alabama.
Perfect.
And when he walked up and saw Nat's
storm.
3 new cars in the driveway, every year he got a Lincoln, a Cadillac, and a Jaguar, and this big home on a golf course. Anyway, he was going to get him, and he got him for like 6 figures. So, and the terrible thing Nat said is that you have to work harder to pay it off, and when you work harder, you go into a higher bracket.
Right.
So it's like
can't get out.
It's like perspiring into your soup. You know, you never finished it. It's less and less. So he decided to put together a show, and we took it on the road, and I was the new comedy sensation, as he said, carried the full orchestra with him, used the local strings from the regions, used 16 strings and 7 brass and 5 reeds and 5 rhythm, and he had 16 singers and dancers, and there were 8 guys and 8 girls, and 8 black and 8 white, and they danced together on stage. Now, this was in the early 60s, so obviously no southern cities.
Right,
so
not
we booked
accepted.
all northern cities.
Right.
And the show went beautifully, and Nat's idea of a good time was after the show, he had a bottle of J&B Scotch, and we go to the dressing room. I wasn't drinking at the time, so I had a 6-pack of soda or something, and I bring a couple cigars, and we'd sit, he'd have us spin it in the hotel room, and the governor would call, the mayor would call, say, "Oh, we have a meeting, we can't make," and he'd send out for some fried chicken or some pizza, and we'd sit around and we'd play duets, and we'd make up dirty lyrics to his hits, and that was his idea of the...
Nat King Cole.
Yeah, I was...
Working blue.
And we worked, we worked 41 one-nighters in a row. And I was in a hotel once, and my wife called, and she said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Wait a minute." I couldn't find my schedule, and I opened the hotel. I was looking for a pack of matches that said Johnson Hotel, Dubuque, Iowa, or something, you know, and there was no stationery, and I couldn't call the front desk and ask the clerk where I am. He'd think I'm nuts.
Right.
So I had my wife go through the itinerary to find out, and she had to tell me.
Because it all just just runs
I have to
together.
tell you what, I
after a
just
while.
remember this one quick story. Nat called me in and he said, he said we have a one-nighter in Louisville, Kentucky. And he said, so now I was doing a routine in the show. Now it was very topical at the time because Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General. John Kennedy was alive. In fact, Nat, when we worked Washington, Nat went to the White House for lunch with President Kennedy. And he said, "You want to go?" And I was so intimidated. I said, I don't think I'm ready for that. So Nat had lunch with the president, and he came back. We did the show there. Anyway, later on, we're doing these shows. He said, we have this Southern show. And I was doing this routine about Bobby Kennedy talking. This was when the march in Selma, and there was a police sergeant named Bull Schrader. and he sigged the police dogs on Martin Luther King and the marchers. So I was doing this conversation between Bobby Kennedy and Bull Schrader. And Bobby Kennedy, of course, is very articulate and using big words. We sort of feel that the civil rights of certain people have been violated. And Bull Schrader was, well, I don't know what you're talking about up there. So he said, look, let me put you on the phone here with the man in charge of the anti-Alabama Police Department, Sergeant Jones. He said, Sergeant Jones, you talk to the man. Well, Sergeant Jones was the police dog. So I'd get down and go, rah, 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 rah. Well, up north, everybody, this was very tough. Up north, everybody to play. So we're working Louisville, Kentucky. So Nat calls me in the room. He says, obviously, you're not going to do that routine tonight. I said, no, it's probably in bad taste. He said, no, it's not in bad taste. It's not going to happen tonight. I said, okay, boss. Now, 4 of the guys in the band were black, the rhythm section, and the lead trumpet player, Renault Jones, who was with the Basie band. They all came to my dressing room. They said, look, you're not going to do that routine tonight because we're down in the pit, and they have to cross us to get to you. You're not going to do that routine.
They're protecting themselves.
Now, the singers and the dancers come to me. You're not going to do that routine, are you? I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So I'm out doing my regular routine. I look out in the audience. There's an aisle up the middle. It's a big theater. And this half of the theater is 100% white. And this half is 100% black. It's a black university, I think a school called Emory or something. That's sold out. And there is not one black face on this side, and there's not one face on this side. Yeah. And standing up the middle, separating these two societies, are like 6 overweight redneck policemen. And they're standing there, So I'm doing my regular routine. Everybody's laughing. I said, to hell with it. So I start into this routine, and I look down, and the band, all the sax players put the cap on the reeds. Trumpet players take the mouthpiece out. John Collins, the guitar player, great guitar. John unplugged the amp. He's get his guitar off. The drummers grab his sticks, and I get to the punchline, and I do the police dog. Well, there's dead silence for about 5 seconds, and this one cop, who's the closest to the stage, starts to laugh, goes, and then another person, and this thing built into a roar, and people start to slap each other's hands across the aisles. It was as though they had been waiting 150 years for someone to say to them, hey, psst, you know what's going on down here? It was like someone had tapped them on the shoulder, and it was a release. And I walked off, and Nat walked by. I swear to God, he looked pale. He looked pale. He walked by me, and he gave me a dirty look, and the only thing he said was, damn. And he went out and finished the show.
Oh, see, that's kind of your style, though.
I was young and crazy then,
You're young and crazy, but is that how you develop? Because first of all, you were a musician first, right?
Well, I was the guy in the band who was the most extroverted. So this was the bebop area when we played. If we played a song and the audience started to dance, we'd change the song because that meant we weren't a success. We were not supposed to be liked. We were artists,
Is that jazz?
It was real. I mean, we weren't just playing like swing or Dixieland. We were into the bebop stuff, Right.
The more difficult, tricky
music.
The
Miles Davis and Charlie Parker and Bud Powell. We were in. So they would make me make the announcements. They say, you make. So I say, here's a song written by Duke Ellington, and I think it was actually written by Billy Strayhorn, but it's a great song, and we'd like to play a little thing called Sophisticated Lady. We play, and then I got tired of just doing that. Here's a song written by Billy Strayhorn and Clyde Beatty. They were on an expedition in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, in the Susquehanna River, and the people would start, and the announcements got to be the amusing part of the people would start to laugh and applaud, and then we'd start playing. They'd turn away and start drinking. So little by little, I became like that guy up front that they'd push up front. And in the beginning, I'd steal some routines, but then I got the formula for creating routines.
Right.
And then I'd hear something, and say, hey, that's a good idea.
And
know,
you
for
just try it out
yeah,
and it would develop.
And I've never been good at writing. Now I can write for TV because I wrote just about all the episodes of our sitcom. I can write for routines for other actors and comics, but not for myself. I can't quite do that. That has to be done on stage. So you go on with the premise, and you say, well, here's a good idea, and you keep developing it until
experimenting.
Yeah, and then you get the rhythm of it, and then your experience. It's like writing arrangements. You know where the saxophone should be in here, the alto should be here, the tenor should be here, the baritone sax is here, and you sort of get the mojo of that, and you get the rhythm. Then you learn that there are certain phrases that makes something funny. Like I do a line sometimes if there's somebody in the audience from a small town in the Midwest. I think I did it the other night. Somebody there from Iowa or something.
Right.
I said, "Where are you from?" In Iowa, from Dubuque. And I always say, "Hey, a lot of comedians make, off color remarks about a small town like Dubuque, like you're not sophisticated or something." They'd say, "You don't know what's happening." I said, "But every place is sophisticated anymore, and I would never make a remark like that. And it's an honor and a privilege to have you in my audience." Then I walk over and tap the piano. And said, "This here's a piano. You never see, you never saw anything this big didn't have John Deere written on it." So it's like but it's in good natured, And
well, but I know we're running out of time because you're like a walking encyclopedia.
Well,
of show business.
I'm just talkative. Nobody ever talks to me anymore.
Well, okay.
You get old and people ignore you.
I have to accordion.
Yeah, the cordine. It's actually
cordine.
cordine. I started on the cordine playing Polish weddings back in Scranton,
Really?
Pennsylvania. Yeah, these people, if you're from one of your ladies from Michigan, she knows Polish weddings because they got Hamtramck there. Polish weddings last 72 hours and do not require bride or groom. It's a party, and it goes on. And there's always some 600-pound brother-in-law who comes up to the band and he says, "Hey, play nothing but polkas all night or I'll kill you." So you're playing around these polkas all night long. And
developed into a bit that you did.
I did an album. It was sort of an underground thing. I wanted it released. I had a contract with Decca at the time, but they were terrified of it. It's called Jazz at a Polish Wedding. What it is, it's songs like Stella by Starlight and Night in Tunisia, like real hip jazz songs, but all done as polkas with only 2 chords. Just according.
That would not.
Anyway, they refused to release it because they said it's an ethnic joke, and I said, "No, you don't understand. This is based on a reality, and those groups are right." And they refused to release it, and the album got lost. Now my drummer had a copy that he saved, but his was beat up and it wouldn't work anymore. And for all intents and purposes, it was gone, and you couldn't reproduce it because we sat in the recording studio and looked at each other, and I said, "Follow me," and we just did this. So anyway, many years later, 25, 30 years later, I was privileged enough to be called by Frank Sinatra, and he said, "Would you work with Sinatra at Carnegie Hall?"
Yeah.
Yeah, would I work with Sinatra? Well, let me think about that. Obviously, your seats were like $2,000 if you could get one.
Wow.
They were sold out for a year in advance. And I called, the conductor at the time was Joe Parnell, a guy from Chicago. I said, "Is the old man using a full orchestra?" He said, "Yeah, you might say that. He's using 5 trumpets, 5 trombones, 5 reeds, 5 rhythm, 6 extra reeds, English horn, oboe, bassoon." He said, 4 French horns, he said, and 36 strings. So you might say it's a full orchestra. I said, "Yeah."
Wow.
So anyway, I had a chart. I used to play Autumn Leaves. I had a chart for the full orchestra. You hear them play it, it would like scare you,
Wow.
So I was working Carnegie Hall. I went to the rehearsal at NOLA Studios because I had one piece of music, and I had to play on and play off. So I walked into NOLA Studios, and this Jazz at a Polish Wedding was playing over the intercom, and I stopped and I said, where did that? And the entire orchestra, like 64 guys, stood up and applauded.
Oh,
it was
that's
a real honor.
awesome.
It was like, wow,
that's
man.
Unbelievable.
I said, that's an honor that you could work for all your life and never get. And they kept saying, we thought it was you, but we weren't sure. And then somebody told us it was you. And
That's awesome.
so I got a copy, but I don't have the whole thing. But I have a copy of it somewhere. And
Scott, do we have time to roll that right now?
No, you don't have it.
We don't have it.
No, you don't have it.
We don't have it.
I gave
It's
it.
not gonna. We can't just.
Scott's from California. I gave him a copy of the album, and he tried to smoke it.
Scott. Hey, Scott. Scott. Hey,
Yes,
Scott.
yes,
Can
yes.
I just have a couple more minutes? Could I please?
Really?
What do you need it for?
I really
One
need.
minute?
What are we going to talk
I
about?
just want to say trumpet.
Yeah,
When did you
well,
start playing the trumpet?
jeez.
No, he's
Yeah.
going to do short answers because he
Okay.
knows we are
Okay.
done. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I bought a trumpet at a pawn shop and just started playing, and then I had a group at one time called the Millionaires here in town, and I really started playing because one of the guys was Richie Madison, who was a renowned teacher, and he helped me along, and so we had 3 horns and 3 rhythm and a girl singer, and it was really
Which led into a comedy routine with the
yeah,
trumpet,
which was
is
the 4th
unbelievable.
trumpet I do,
Yeah.
and then I do San Francisco on the trumpet, and I have this old beat up trumpet. People say, "Where'd you?" I say, "I made it out of a lamp."
All right, one more thing. One
Yeah.
more thing. The haircut.
Well, this is called I need a haircut. My barber's sick.
No, but you have
Tony the barber's
No,
sick.
but it's good. But I'm saying you always comb it down and forward.
Well, you know,
kinda
this
like
is
a Beatles cut.
This is how my hair grows.
It does?
Yeah, there's just
It goes
nothing I
that
can
way?
do. I tried different ways, and it just comes back this way. But I actually just need a haircut now.
But you're famous for the look with the beard.
Yeah,
and the,
people say, "Is that a wig?" I said, "Would you buy a wig?" So,
All right,
yeah,
before
so-
we go, you are working on Saturday nights.
Yeah, with Sammy Shore, my good buddy, who's got a comedy showcase. thing.
hysterical, yeah.
Yes, Sammy's a good guy. Sammy's 85 years old. I wrote a little thing for an introduction called "We're Just a Couple of Geezers," and it's working out nice. And we do a show Saturday night at 8 o'clock
At the Clarion.
at the Clarion,
Which is right here on Convention Center
It
Drive.
used to be Debbie Reynolds, if you
Yes.
you know to identify it. Before that, it was the Paddle Wheel.
Paddle wheel.
Before
and-
that, it was Desert.
Yes, there you go. It has been
Iguanas.
it has been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank to the orchestra, the entire
Of
orchestra.
course. I mean, I wish we could have done something musical, but
Yeah.
maybe next time we'll do that and we'll have you back.
Well, if you'd get rid of Scott and get a decent director, have some time. You program a little bit.
We needed more time. Thank you for your precious stories.
Oh,
and
thank
I'm
you.
such a big fan. And
Thank
Clint
you. I know
says
that.
hello.
And my love to Clint. You know, he's a
Yes.
good buddy for a lot of years. And,
Yes, I do.
And I love him.
Thank you. And
Thank
you for being on Talktails. Thank you, Kenny and Scott and Tara and Jacob. We'll see you next week, next Monday. I'm your host, Kelly Clinton-Holmes, with the big stars like Pete Barbutti. Yeah, keep playing.